In 1866, a boy named Robert Leroy Parker was born. And little did the West know this boy, the eldest of 13 Mormon children, would soon grow into one of its most infamous and romanticized outlaws, none other than the Butch Cassidy. Growing up as a rancher, Robert became an excellent horseman, but in his teenage years he took a turn when he fell under the influence of a rancher-turned-outlaw named Mike Cassidy. Robert didn't just adopt Mike's last name, he adopted his criminal ways too. He started out small by stealing cattle and robbing stores, but Robert soon escalated to bigger crimes. In 1889, he earned his first taste of fame after leading a small gang later known as the Wild Bunch through their first major heist, a bank robbery in Telluride, Colorado. But this was just the beginning. Over the next several years, Butch and his crew would rob 3 more banks, 4 express trains, and even a coal mine company's payroll. These are all confirmed incidents, although there were likely more. And much of Cassidy's success as an outlaw came from his meticulous planning. He would often stash fresh horses along his escape routes, outsmarting the lawmen who were hot on his trail. He was known for defending the rights of the settlers against the wealthy cattle barons of the West. Cassidy even earned the reputation as a gentleman bandit. Unlike many other outlaws of his time, he preferred to avoid violence and often would return stolen horses. He was known to write apology letters to those he had stolen from, which is a curious twist for a man who led a life of crime. But Butch Cassidy's life of crime was only a part of his story. It was his charisma, his calculated methods, and his unique sense of morality that made him more than just a criminal. He became a legend. In the years to come, the West would not only remember him as an outlaw, but a symbol of rebellion and adventure. Next, we'll explore how Butch Cassidy's legacy influenced the culture and appearance of the American West.
The legends and stories around Butch Cassidy play a huge role in the myth and romance of the Wild West. For many people, the West represented freedom and the possibility of new life and a new identity. He was born Robert Leroy Parker, but he became the infamous Butch Cassidy. His origins were humble, born to a poor immigrant family, but he made himself a notorious outlaw who stole a fortune worth of riches. If his family's claims are true, after his trip to South America, he was able to shed his outlaw persona and live out the rest of his life in obscurity, thus showing the new land in the West was an opportunity to recreate one's identity. Butch's exploits and legends symbolize freedom in the myth of the Wild West. Injustice in his hometown is what moved him to take the law into his own hands, thus making him an outlaw. Many have compared his story to the legend of Robin Hood, claiming he robbed from the rich to give to the poor. Some have also claimed that Butch never killed anyone or ever fired his pistol. This seems to illustrate the freedom and honor that appeal to the desired traits in the West. These caricatures of Butch have been passed down in the history books and made legend.
Robert Leroy Parker is often seen as a symbol of the American West, embodying the romanticized image of an outlaw. Cassidy's exploits with the Wild Butch Gang contributed to the popular myth of the cowboy outlaw. This romanticization has persisted in literature, film, and folklore.
We see the continuation of the romance of this notorious outlaw in famous movies, like Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid and other films and novels, playing on the mystery and romance of his life and death. These tall tales and legends highlight the romanticized elements of Butch Cassidy, just as they do the West. They paint the desired image of what people wanted to see.
Cassidy was known for his innovative techniques in robbery and evasion. His approach to crime influenced other outlaws in the area and contributed to the lawlessness of the West. The activities of the Cassidy gang prompted changes in law enforcement tactics, leading to the development of more organized and strategic responses to crime in the West. Cassidy's legacy has become a focal point in tourism in places like Wyoming and Utah. Historical sites related to his life and exploits attract visitors, contributing to the local economy in those states and preserving the Western heritage. Cassidy's story reflects broader themes of poverty, rebellion, and the struggle for identity in the post-Civil War era. Because of Butch Cassidy, cowboys became iconic figures represented rugged individualism, freedom, and the spirit of adventure. Cowboys were essential to cattle ranching industry, which drove economic growth in the West. They facilitated cattle drives that brought livestock to markets and significantly contributed to the economy and the development of railroads. In summary, outlaws and cowboys were essential to development of the American West, influencing the economy, culture, and social dynamics while leaving a lasting legacy that continues on to this day.
Now let's rewind time a little bit to before Butch Cassidy ascended to myth and legend.
In February 1901, tired after 12 years of robbing banks and trains and running from the law, Butch and Sundance, along with Sundance's girlfriend, Etta Place, hopped on a steamship from New York to Argentina. They bought a 4-room cabin on 15,000 acres of land near Cholila. They intended to retire from the wildlife and become honest ranchers, and for 4 years they lived in peace. But in 1905, Argentinian police were alerted by the Pinkerton Detective Agency that the notorious outlaws were in their country, and the manhunt resumed. A local friend tipped them off, and they sold the ranch in May of that year. By 1905, Butch and the kid were in Antofagasta, Chile, having sent Etta back to the U.S. There, the Sundance Kid killed a policeman, 24-year-old Arturo Gonzalez, supposedly by accident. After posting the $50,000 bond, the pair headed back to Argentina. Needing money, they returned to what they did best and robbed another bank. Feeling the heat again, they turned and fled north to Bolivia, where they hoped to be safe. Still wanting to settle down as respectable ranchers, Cassidy and Sundance got work at the Concordia tin mine. Ironically, their main duties included guarding the company payroll. After working for the mine for a year or so, the two moved south to Santa Cruz, a frontier town in Bolivia's eastern savanna, in late 1907, and here is where things start to get uncertain. What is known is that on November 3, 1908, 2 masked men, supposedly identified as Americans, robbed the payroll of the Aramayo Franque and Cia silver mine near the small mining town of San Vicente in southern Bolivia. 3 days later, these men were spotted at a boarding house in San Vicente. Calls went out across the telegraph wires, and on the evening of November 6th, 3 soldiers dispatched from the Abaro Cavalry Regiment stationed nearby, along with the local police officer, mayor, and some of the mayor's officials, all surrounded the lodging house, where a shootout ensued, which lasted for several hours and into the evening. Around 2 a.m., a scream came from inside the house, followed by 2 gunshots, followed by silence. The next morning, 2 bodies were found in the house, riddled with bullets. One had a bullet wound in the forehead, the other a bullet hole in the temple. It is assumed that the second man shot the first, then himself. Police identified these men as the same ones who robbed the payroll, but they didn't know their names and could not positively identify them. The 2 bodies were buried in the small San Vicente cemetery. In 1991, American forensic anthropologist Clyde Snow traveled to Bolivia and attempted to use DNA to positively identify the bodies. Instead, he ended up proving that they were not Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. Since the shootout in San Vicente, many reports of Butch in America have surfaced. Some say he was working in Nevada. Others say he married a woman in Oregon and lived there until he died. Butch's sister claims he came to visit their father in Circleville, Utah in 1925, more than 15 years after his supposed death. Some of the witnesses who claim to have seen the outlaws after their alleged death are Butch's former girlfriend, Josie Bassett, Elza Lai, who rode with the Wild Bunch when he was younger, and the daughter of Wild Bunch outlaw Matt Warner, Joyce Warner. Joyce claims Cassidy wrote her 3 letters while he was living in Nevada under an alias, and even came to visit her. If they did get away, how did they pull it off? Well, it's all thanks to a man named Percy Siebert. Percy was a native Bolivian living in Bolivia at the time and a friend of Butch and the Kid. He is the one who identified the bodies as belonging to the outlaws. According to Butch's sister, Siebert knew it wasn't them, but used this opportunity to fake their deaths. In this way, he felt he was paying Cassidy back for saving his and his wife's life earlier in their friendship. This made it possible for Butch and Sundance to finally get their dream of living a life free from the past that didn't let them rest. So, is it true? Did they die in San Vicente? Were they ever even there to begin with? The Pinkertons certainly gave the idea of their disappearance some credit as they continued to search for the two after San Vicente. Whether they were buried in Bolivia or out in Oregon, it is truly part of the undying myth of the West and the freedom at the end of the trail.